Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred. And the last several videos, I have been going over Martha Sweezy's book, Internal Family Systems Therapy for Shame and Guilt. And all of the past videos I've done have been about the 6 acts of the shame cycle and examples of those. And today I'm going to start talking about guilt. So the difference between shame and guilt is shame says, I am bad. It's about this huge burden of identity. And guilt says, I did something bad. I'm not necessarily bad. I did something bad, and I recognize this. And Martha Sweezy explains that in guilt, you can have adaptive guilt and maladaptive guilt. So in adaptive guilt, you recognize that you did something that was not in alignment with your values or with your value or the value of the person in front of you. And so it motivates you to make repair and to do better and to apologize and do pro-social things like that. So it's really, whereas shame and that identity leads to this toilet bowl spiral, right? Adaptive guilt can actually lead to productive behavior. But there is also something called maladaptive guilt, which is when parts of us take responsibility for something that we really are not responsible for. And a really big aspect of this is what we're going to talk about today, which is the parentified child parts. So in family systems, they often talk about the parentified child, which is usually this role reversal where the child is taking care of the parent instead of the other way around. But in IFS, we talk about we can have a parentified child part within us. It's not that all of us is a parentified child, though that could be our dominant part and seem like who we are. But in order to identify if you have a parentified child part that basically holds maladaptive guilt, there are 6 clues to this that Martha gives in chapter 7. So I'm going to read them and just see if you identify with any of them or not. So the first one, and this could be you or it could be your client or someone you know. The first one has a history of self-sacrifice, along with a bent for and possibly some pointed rebellion against caretaking. So usually a parentified child self-sacrifice, caretakes, gives, but then also has this polarized part that's very angry and resentful about it. So those 2 parts usually exist in a system that has this parentified child part. For example, adult clients may speak of a living parent as if they are the child, or speak of being angry with the parent while meticulously caring for them, right? So this parentified child part is still absolutely going to care for the adult parent, but the other one feels really resentful about it. The second indication has empathy for and maybe identification with a dysfunctional caretaker, boss, or partner where one might reasonably expect anger. So again, the parentified child part, as the person grows up, begins to turn that caretaking toward everyone in their life, whether it's a boss or a partner or a friend. It's a pattern in their life. Number 3 is feels guilty about achieving developmental milestones. This is separation guilt, or about being successful, which is survivor guilt. So there's this feeling of I can't excel beyond where my parent has been without guilt. Or I can't achieve something that they haven't achieved. It's a direct affront to them. So there's this sense of guilt about it that is not actually adaptive. It's not really their responsibility to stunt themselves, right? Because usually the parentified child is really about suppressing their own needs, desires, achievements, because everything, the spotlight is on the parent. Let's see. Number 4 is hates or has a deep fear of disappointing others. This was probably the biggest fear of my system. Many of you know my people pleaser Cassandra, who's 6 years old, who's a parentified child part. And when I asked her, what are you afraid would happen if you displeased others? She says, we will die. It's that extreme, because as this parentified child, if you don't please the parent or take care of the parent, then you do die, right? Because they're supposed to be your caretaker. So you see that they're not functioning, trying to take care of that, of the parent, so that they can take care of you. And it really is survival based, right? Let's see. Number 5 has fears and biases that don't match their life experience. So this is really a legacy burden, right? When we're enmeshed with a parent and they have a fear or a dislike or a bias that we haven't ever, maybe they're afraid of water and we've never had a negative experience with water, but we take that on. Oh, they're afraid of water, so I also have to be afraid of water. They don't like onions, so I also need to not like onions, right? There's just a little bit of an enmeshment. And then number 6 is the last one, has burdens that stick around even after being released by the exile. Okay, so sometimes people will ask me this, like, I think I did an unburdening. I think that it, but it just didn't seem to stick. It just their burdens keep coming back up. And often this is because there's actually a parentified child part that is protecting and blocking that exile and won't really let you get to them. And this is really complex trauma, right? It's not just one incident that happened. It's a million incidents over years of time. And so this kind of wounding takes a lot of time, a lot of witnessing, and a lot of gaining trust between the self and this parentified child part. Usually the parentified child has led and protected the system for so long, and they believe that the system is only surviving because of them, that they have a really difficult time releasing the reins to the self. So it's really important that our self is patient and appreciative of everything they've done and proposes small experiments and lets them, just tell everything that they want to be known about how they've protected the system. So I do want to give you an example. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's many pages long, but just to give you an example of Martha's work with a girl who is a parentified child. This is about Maggie. Maggie is an 18-year-old cisgender, heterosexual Irish American high school student. Her one older brother, Jackson, lives a few states away, and her parents were divorced. She lived with her mother, Irene, and came to therapy after Irene had given her an ultimatum: therapy or move out. Due to an argument over Irene, the mother's boyfriend, Craig, whom Maggie, the 18-year-old, disliked intensely. Irene, who's the mother, in turn disliked Maggie's friends. So Maggie had considered moving out rather than going to therapy, but her parentified part would not allow it. You see, Maggie took care of Irene, cleaning the house and using money she earned on weekends to buy food, put gas in the car, and take her mother's cat to the vet. While she scoffed at Irene's disciplinary efforts and got enraged when Irene tried to exert control over her, this is the polarized angry part, her caretaking part, this parentified child, never flagged. I break this example down into segments and index each segment to one of the clues mentioned above. Okay, so I'm just going to read a couple of them and get the book if you want to read the rest. But so Maggie's parentified part scorns Irene, which is her mother. So in this monologue, Maggie's parentified part, who was blended, disparaged Irene's boyfriend and spoke of Irene as if she were the child and Maggie the parent. Maggie says, this asshole freaking empties our refrigerator and watches TV all day in our house. You know what? She won't admit it, but that's his pay for sticking around. She's pitiful. As soon as I finish school, I'm out of here. I'm done cleaning up after her. She better not come to me for money either. I will not support her. So again, she has this polarization where it's this compulsion. I have to take care of her or else. I hate her. I don't want to take care of her. She's terrible. So in this interchange, Maggie described being angry with Irene, her mother, and taking care of her, revealing a polarity between a rebellious part and the parentified part. So Maggie says, I came home from basketball practice and they were dead drunk on the floor. The kitchen was a mess. The cat was starved. The windows were wide open and it was pouring rain. I almost took her car and drove to Colorado to live with Jackson, her brother. The therapist says, what did you do? Maggie sighs and says, what do you think? I closed the windows. I mopped the floor. I fed the cat. I did the dishes and I turned off the TV. But I didn't cover them with blankets. So again, it's like this parentified child part that's like, I have to take care of them. And this other part that's like, just F them, leave them, take the car and drive to Colorado, show them by not putting blankets on them, right? And often in this situation, if you or one of your clients has a parentified child part, you will see both of these parts at play, right? Sometimes the parentified child part, the caretaking part in their, maybe with their partner or boss or whatever, is so incredibly dominant that it's suppressing the angry, bitter part. For me, that was true. My Sebastian, my angry, resentful part was so suppressed that it ended up being manifesting in my body. My body would collapse and fall apart because Cassandra, my parentified child pleaser caretaker, would just go forward and do whatever the person in front of me wanted to please them. And so I really had to resurrect this balancing part, right? This says, no, you are selling the farm. This is not okay. You are trampling over your own needs, your own desires. You are making yourself small. And so in some cases, in some systems, that part, when you see that part, it's actually healthy. It's actually a burden system's way of trying to achieve balance. When one or the other is dominant, the system can be very extreme. Now, even when both of them are there, the system is very stressed and pulled back and forth. There's just a lot of energy going toward it. So as you know, if you know IFS, the solution is really to get to know both of these parts. For me, I had to resurrect the angry part. And then when he would come up, he was pointing at the caretaking, parentified child part, saying, help her, she is so extreme. And then I would turn to her and say, what are you afraid would happen? And she's like, terrified. I'm afraid we're going to die. Like, you can't take care of this. I've been doing this my whole life. I've got to do this. Very, very burdened, very desperate. So, I mean, it's been about 1.5 years now. I've been working with her and gradually unloading all of these moments where her needs and her desires had to be suppressed. And it's a beautiful, beautiful healing process that it takes some time, but it's worth it. It's worth it to get to know these parts, to listen to their experiences, to go back to the parts underneath, the young parts that they're protecting, and to reparent them, to be with them in the ways that they needed, that they didn't have. And it's just a beautiful healing process. So if you think that you or your client or someone you know has parentified child parts, be patient. There's a lot underneath that just really needs witnessing and loving attention.